Marriage on the brink. Rekindling love or letting go. 2 months ago, a man's wife of 14 years asked for a separation, leaving him completely shocked. They had not been intimate for a year, mainly due to the side effects of his anxiety medication. While he continued to show affection through small gestures, she felt hurt and rejected due to the lack of physical intimacy. She accused him of emotional abuse, financial control, and making their marriage toxic. She suggested living as friends to co-parent their 2 children with special needs. Over the past 2 months, he has made significant changes, helping more with housework and spending more time with the family, but she has set firm boundaries, avoiding intimacy and showing increasing independence. He doesn't want the marriage to end, but feels conflicted about how to move forward. While he is determined to save the relationship, he struggles with whether his current efforts are sustainable and doubts if co-parenting as friends is a realistic long-term solution.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
I'm ready.
This one's a little bit different. So we're diving into a plea for advice, actually, from a husband looking for some clarity and some guidance as he's going through a pretty difficult situation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's been married for 14 years. He has 2 children with special needs.
Okay.
And his wife has asked for a separation, citing emotional abuse and lack of intimacy.
Oh.
So he's trying to figure out, as you can imagine, where things went wrong, what he can do now. And so we're gonna kind of dive into his story and try to offer some advice. Obviously not knowing all the details, but with what he shared with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with the information that we have, try to provide some guidance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he mentioned feeling blindsided by his wife's decision. So that's something that really stood out to me. It's like he wasn't really aware that things were this bad. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that for his wife to take this step, I mean, especially with the added responsibility of children with special needs, it must have been a really, really difficult decision for her.
Yeah, it must have been something that she was thinking about for a long time.
Exactly. And for her to, refuse financial support from him, that really indicates like a strong desire for independence and a clear message that she needs space and time to figure things out.
Yeah, she's drawing a hard line in the sand, it sounds like.
Exactly.
So that's something to be aware of for sure.
Yeah.
Now, he also mentioned that, he thought that he was happy in the marriage and that he thought he was expressing affection in his own way.
Right.
And so I'm curious, like, what do you think about that?
Well, sometimes we're not always fully aware of the impact our actions are having on those around us and those we love, right? And so, it sounds like maybe there is some disconnect in terms of, what he thought he was communicating and what his wife was actually receiving.
Yeah, and he mentioned that his medication was affecting his libido.
Right.
And so he was kind of using that as a reason for why there wasn't as much physical intimacy. But, I think, intimacy goes beyond the physical, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Intimacy, it's not just about the physical act.
Right.
It's about emotional connection, feeling desired, feeling seen, feeling heard, and being attentive to your partner's needs, desires, and wants.
Right, feeling like a priority, like you're the most important person in their life.
Exactly. And so it's possible that, those are areas where his wife was feeling a disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and we've talked about this before on the show, but, for a lot of people, when they think about the term emotional abuse,
right,
like that brings up images of like, yelling and screaming.
Right.
But it can be a lot more subtle than that.
Absolutely. I mean, emotional abuse can often involve, these patterns of behavior that chip away at a person's self-esteem and sense of security. And so, think constant criticism, right? Dismissiveness, gaslighting, or, isolating someone from their support system.
Right.
I mean, these are all, forms of abuse, and they can be difficult to recognize because it often happens gradually.
Yeah, it's death by 1,000 cuts kind of a thing, right?
Exactly. But the cumulative effect can be absolutely devastating.
Yeah, so how can our listeners start to, I guess, understand if his actions, even if they were unintentional, might have contributed to his wife feeling emotionally abused?
That's such a great question. And I think, a good starting point would be to actively listen to his wife's experiences.
Right.
Right, and really try to understand her perspective.
Right.
Instead of getting defensive when she tries to share how she's feeling or share her experience, try to really just listen and understand her perspective.
Right, yeah, just try to be in the moment and really listen.
Exactly. And, imagine stepping into her shoes, right?
Yeah.
And seeing the world through her eyes.
Yeah, and validating her feelings too, right?
Yeah.
Like saying, I understand why you feel that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so important.
Even if it doesn't make sense to you, right? I mean, her feelings are valid regardless.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of whether or not you meant to cause her to feel that way. Her feelings are valid and they matter.
Yeah, feelings are feelings,
Yeah.
and you have to acknowledge them.
Absolutely.
So now, he also mentioned that, they're sharing a bed, but there's no intimacy. They're spending time together as a family. But she set these really firm boundaries.
Right.
So it's kind of a confusing mix of signals, right?
It is. It's a confusing mix of signals, and it's natural to cling to any sign of hope.
Yeah, of course.
For reconciliation, right. I mean, anyone would do that.
Especially after 14 years and with kids.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a significant investment in a deep love, right?
Yeah.
But respecting those boundaries is paramount.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, she's made it clear that she needs this space and this time. And so, while it's wonderful that you're spending time together as a family, it's important to respect the boundaries that she's put in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did mention that he's a little bit concerned about, making things too easy for her.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't want to fall back into those unhealthy patterns.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Well, that's a valid concern. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to enable unhealthy patterns or behaviors. And so it's important to strike a balance between, showing love and support, but also holding healthy boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some steps that he can take to start addressing the situation and, potentially rebuild that trust?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think, the first step is to commit to deep, honest self-reflection.
Okay.
Right? I mean, really take a look at yourself in the mirror, at your actions, at your behaviors, and how they've impacted your wife, your children, your marriage.
So how would you recommend doing that? Like, what are some concrete steps for self-reflection?
Yeah. I mean, consider journaling, right? Writing down your thoughts, your feelings. Maybe even writing about your interactions with your wife, but do so really focusing on her needs, right? And how your actions may have affected her, even if unintentional.
Right. So like trying to see it from her perspective.
Exactly, putting yourself in her shoes. And the second thing I would strongly encourage is to seek professional help.
Yeah.
Individual therapy can be incredibly beneficial in helping you to understand your own behaviors.
Yeah.
Developing healthier communication patterns, addressing any underlying issues that might be contributing to the problems in your relationship.
Yeah. And, sometimes we all have blind spots, right? Like we don't even see the things that we're doing that are hurtful.
Absolutely. And a therapist can really help you to identify those blind spots and start to make positive changes. And then, of course, if your wife is willing, couples therapy can be a really valuable tool in creating a safe space to address these issues and work towards healing.
Right. So it sounds like it's really important to prioritize, getting professional help, doing that self-reflection.
Absolutely.
And just kind of really taking a hard look at yourself and your role in all of this.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that change takes time.
Yes.
And effort.
It's not going to happen overnight.
Exactly. It's a journey.
Right.
And it's important to be patient with yourself, patient with the process, but to stay committed to doing the work.
Yeah. And throughout all of this, obviously, the well-being of the children has to be the top priority, right?
Absolutely. I mean, maintaining a stable and loving environment for those kids is crucial, even as you navigate this really challenging period.
Yeah. And it sounds like this is, he's got a long road ahead of him.
He does.
But it sounds like he's asking the right questions. He's willing to do the work.
Yeah.
So, that's a really good sign.
It is. It's a really positive sign that he's reaching out, that he wants to understand. He wants to make things better.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what is one question that you'd like to leave our listener with?
I would ask, what would a healthy and fulfilling relationship look like for both you and your wife? Individually and together, because I think that question can really guide you as you move forward.
Yeah.
Regardless of the outcome.
Right. So even if they decide to stay together or not.
Exactly.
It's about kind of figuring out what that ideal scenario looks like.
Absolutely. What does happiness look like for each of you, individually and as a couple?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a really insightful conversation, I think. It's a lot to process. But it really comes down to open communication, right? Self-awareness and that genuine commitment to growth.
Yes.
And I think that, that's something that we can all benefit from, whether we're going through separation or not. So just remember, change takes time and effort.
It does.
Keep asking those tough questions. Prioritize creating that healthier dynamic, both for yourself and for your family. And until next time, happy diving, everyone.
Happy diving.